So, last couple of weeks, I've been having a conversation with a black conservative, a black Republican. Um, Trying to unpack a few things. Our last conversation, I ultimately felt like we hit a wall. Ultimately, I do believe we feel like the problems that's in the black community are the same. However, I feel that it's a result of systematic racism over the years, subjected by the powers that be, uh, ever since our kidnapping. Through our whole Ma'afa, we have been plagued with pain, uh, post-traumatic stress, and a host of other traumas, and we're never ever able to heal from that. And when you leave PTSD untreated, you gravitate to drugs and alcohol, and prone to violence. So, to add to her talking point that black people are more violent, like per capita for the most part, we're about 50% of the murders, is what was stated. Talking points that they usually use on Fox News, Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, all these guys, you know what I'm saying? So when black people are saying the same things these guys say, it kind of bothers me. But, people believe what they believe. So certain things speak to certain people. But what concerns me is that all of this came about because was talking about Black Lives Matter and how it was not a great organization because they did these things and they're trying to dismantle the black family and da 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 da. And it bothered me that this person said this, and I was like, wow, you know, I'm not saying Black Lives Matter has always done the best job at certain things, but as a brand, like you can't say nothing bad about homosexuals at all because they will come get you. They stick together, they march together, and they have branding. They branded their whole thing. LBGTQ community has been branded as something you can't attack. I was hoping Black Lives Matter would be that for us. Like, you can't say nothing bad about Black Lives Matter. You can't say nothing bad about black people. Be quiet. But at the same time, spitting these numbers, I had to pull up a FBI chart that shows that yes, we are close neck and neck in murders with white males, but white males knocks it out the park on every other violent crime, assault, rape, robbery, all of these things. They double and triple the numbers. But so she could say, well, if Black Lives Matter really mattered, why aren't black people worried about this or abortion? Yeah, there's people that are worried about these things, and people speak out against these things, and it always has been. But most black people don't know about Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood and how that was a basis eugenics program trying to hinder the birth of more black people. It really is. So a lot of people don't know that. So, but a lot of people do. So again, these talking points continue to hit me like, but what do you get out of this saying that black folks, it's almost like saying black folks are their own issue, their own problem. And for the most part, I can see that point. But what we're going to talk about the psychology behind why black people only make up 13% of the population, but attributing to, man, I wouldn't say 50, but I would say about 40 something percent of the murders in the United States. Well, we got to look at where these murders are taking place. What are the conditions of the people? And because 2 or 3 people made it out of the ghetto or had unsurmountable odds put a stacked against them, and they were able to come out of that. A pretty flower can grow from shit. Just saying. So to allow people to continue to say, well, y'all talking about police brutality, but look at those cases. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And that's why the police had no choice to kill that person. Whoa. And then you go with black people kill more black people. What does those numbers mean when white people kill white people, Asian people kill Asian people, Hispanic people kill Hispanic people? Why is black always the catalyst for we killing each other? We've been put in a situation where we are not able to sometimes grow like others. I work in the communities where these people are cut off from resources, cut off from education, cut off from opportunities, and you're left with crime. So you have generations of young people coming out of poverty with no hope for the future. So they're going to be subjected to violence. They're going to be subjected to a host and an array of criminal activity to make it. But when you study criminology, you actually have to look at that. A lot of times, poor people commit crimes out of necessity. Rich people commit crimes out of greed. But the rich people go to white collar prisons, and poor people go to real prison. But we have to look at prison reform. We have to look at justice reform. We have to look at a lot of different things. And for people to say Black Lives Matter is a horrible organization and have these disparaging comments about it, I get it. You've been taught to look at the things that way. But nobody says anything about Proud Boys and all these other militias and these groups that are having their ideology and running out of the woods practicing for an Armageddon. But Black Lives Matter is the worst organization right now. They're a terrorist organization, as some would say. And now that they keep trying to attach us to Antifa, well, most of the time, these protests start off peaceful, and there's always an antagonist that comes through and throws a brick, sets something on fire. That's not the whole movement. That's not the whole group. But ironically, after these cities started burning, change started happening. When you look at the history of the country, see, when people always talk about violence in black communities, when we started this country here, they didn't ask the British, hey, you think we can have our freedoms? They went to war. Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death. Malcolm X said something similar, and he was, hung out to dry for it. Why is it when our liberation is needed, there's never been any liberation of any people on this planet that didn't have violence attached to it? War. So when they came and they fought the British and they won, they started this country. And then the first thing they do is enslave a whole people and tell them they can't fight for their own freedoms. And as far as this whole system going right now with voting, after slavery, the enslaved African actually was voted. They were able to vote. started prominent communities. We've always had our rights. There's always just people that stop us from using them or getting them. After slavery, there was the Freedmen's Bureau, and it was designed to assist that enslaved African with getting adjusted to living in a society where they didn't have any skills except for laborer. Wasn't allowed to read, wasn't allowed to get an education. So at this point, they were needing assistance. But of course, this was disbanded. I want to say 1872, because there was a lot of rules in Southern BS starting to come about. Black codes resulted into the next Jim Crow era. Also, prison work release programs, was the loophole in the Constitution that said that you can't treat nobody as a slave until they are criminal no more. So they started criminalizing black men. So here we are in 2020, still criminalizing black men. Our police was started as pretty much the slave catchers. Now, our communities are over-policed. We have a lot of police brutality that is gone unanswered. One of the talking points that this person was saying that there was only a few cases where black people were killed by police, but more white men were killed that same year. Again, police reform. I wouldn't say anything about. I've been the first one to post when they kill white people as well, unarmed and unjustified. But I've also seen hundreds of videos where they'll take them calmly with pepper spray, mace, taser, restraining them without killing them. It's just the ones where we see broadcasted from somebody's cell phone video where they actually didn't use any of these means to subdue, apprehend a person. So that's wrong. And for Black Lives Matter to come out and speak against police brutality, and then somebody go, well, y'all don't care about these lives, or you don't care about this, or you don't care about, that's counterproductive. How can we, I couldn't go to a breast cancer rally screaming lung cancer. They'll feel like that's disrespectful. We're here to talk about breast cancer. It's the same thing here. If we're talking about police brutality, let's talk about police brutality. Let's talk about what we can do for reform. The police need training. The guy that just got killed in Philly, that was one of the things we discussed. And she went on to say that they had no funding to get tasers, and that's why they used deadly force. This man had a knife. What if he? I don't believe that. I don't. And if let's just say they didn't have tasers, let's just say that. It was called on this man because he's having a mental health breakdown. We need to look at why we didn't have mental health professionals. Why we don't have training on what to do in a case where somebody is mentally disturbed. There's so many other things we could have done to prevent that man's death. And I think that if when police are not trained to just kill, because when you look at everything as a nail and you're a hammer, you're just going to keep hammering. So what I need is people to start looking at things from other people's perspective. Until you understand what it means to be starving, till you know what it means to go through pain of living in an area where there's no fresh fruit, no fresh water, no fresh thinking. You can't tell somebody that they could just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. When you look in the history books and you don't see yourself except in chains, you cannot understand how you're going to get to your liberation or how you're going to pull yourself up. Some people do it. I was sent a video about Ben Carson, and he talked about how he made it out of the projects. But he also talked about how his mom worked for white people and would come home and try to instill in her kids what she saw the white families instill in their kids. Reading and certain ways to act and things of that nature. So he said my mom was a spy. In reality, she was, because she took what they did to be successful, and that's part of our problem. We take what we see white people do to be successful and try to mimic that. And what you do is try to be a white person in a black skin, and that doesn't always work out for everybody. Dr. Ben going on to be one of the top neurosurgeons, and that's amazing. That was an amazing feat, and I would always applaud him for that. But also, he said some things that had made me feel like, wow, that was just callous. So you made it out, but what did you do for anybody else that was left there? Did you go back? You're the Secretary of Housing. What are you doing for the people that's going through the things that you went through, the things that you saw? How did you go and say, would I make a difference? When you made your money, when you became a doctor, did you go back to that same neighborhood and say, let me help change the thinking? Let me be a mentor to somebody. Did you do any of those things? No, you didn't. These are the issues. When people do make it out of the hood, they leave and never come back. When we're talking about how we're going to govern ourselves, we're not one at all. We have many different thought processes, many different ways of doing things, and we're not going to be on the same page. So what's going to work is if we have one common goal: take care of us. And I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. But a lot of times is buy black. I do that. I support my black businesses. I try my best to do it weekly. And if everybody does that, if we stop pandering to other markets, maybe things will go a little different for us. We start back building black Wall Streets. If it ain't made by black hands, it's not like Dr. Claude Anderson said, we don't use it. Things possibly would change. Educating ourselves. If you take a failing black school that doesn't get any money because the people in that community are not paying the amount of taxes that they pay in suburban neighborhoods, and those schools get more money. The education system should be reversed. If your school is a failing school, you should get more money. The neighborhoods that get less funding, less taxes, should get more funding. But when you educate them on, Karis once said, you can't teach a dog to be a cat. But if you're teaching a black kid something that's not benefiting them psychologically, you're buying into the same system. No different than in Africa. You know, a lot of these countries fought for their freedoms and they gained their independence from these places, but they kept the same system that enslaved them. You go to their court system and they'll be wearing powdered wigs. That's that indoctrination. You know, it continues to manifest all over this planet. You learn from your captors and you continue to use their system. This is a failed system. No, stop. It's not a failed system. It does just what it's supposed to do. And I done rambled on for going on about 20 minutes now. People gonna agree with me some. So I'm gonna say, what the hell was he talking about? But when we go sit at the table for real, we're going to make sure that we're not talking religion, we're not talking personal gain, we're not talking sexual orientation. We're talking about, hey, this is what we need as a community. This is what our goals are, and anything else is just on your personal side. When you go home at night, you run your life a certain way. But when you talk about what we need as a whole, as a people, it should be only one thing, one way. We're looking for these things to happen, and until these things happen, we're not participating in your BS. But all right, I'm out.